Okay, so let's jump in. Pollinators, most people have heard that pollinators and probably honeybees are the biggest that most people talk about. We've all heard about colony collapse disorder. Some people think, oh no, we don't know what causes that. We do. It's a lot of different things that are kind of working together, not in the honeybee's favor. But the good news is that we have lots of other pollinators are out there, and kind of the point of doing the pollinator count is so that we can learn a little bit about those pollinators as well, because they're equally as important, maybe more. The European honeybee is an introduced species, hence the name European, but we have lots and lots of native bees and other native insects that are really awesome pollinators and deserve just as many kudos as the honeybee does. But these are some factoids that most people probably don't think about too much, but you should know pollinators provide one of every three bites of food. That's a lot. There are a few wind pollinated plants out there that produce food, but generally speaking, you've got to have some type of a pollinator that's going to pollinate that flower in order to give you that fruit or vegetable. 29 billion of US farm income comes from indirectly from pollinators because you need them in order to get that fruit or that vegetable. Honeybees arrived over 300 years ago, and before that, everything was done by natives. So 300 years ago sounds a long time. It's really not that long. So before that, Native Americans, um, the early Americans that moved here, everything was done by native bees and other pollinators, and you'll learn about them. 90% of fruiting plants require pollinators. I've mentioned a couple times that wind does some pollinating, and also pollinator diversity equals plant diversity. So there's going to be a lot of different pollinators that are going to pollinate a lot of different plants. So the less diversity you have in pollinators, some of those are intricately attached to each other. So it's very important that you have a very diverse pollinator population. So let's meet them. Some of these are pretty obvious. You've got bumblebees and carpenter bees, hummingbirds. Most people kind of, they don't really think about hummingbirds, but yeah, they're pollinators. And we've got the ruby throat and we've got some migratory birds that come through here. We've got moths and butterflies. Don't forget about bats. There's a lot of bats. I mean, sometimes people live in the little bubble that is whatever is right around them, but we forget we've got a big world out there and there's a lot of tropical stuff out there. A lot of those are bats and they do a lot of pollinating. Beetles. You see that beetle on the far left coated in pollen. Sometimes they're accidental pollinators. I think that's what they call them, but they're out there, they're eating and they're picking up pollen and they're carrying it from flower to flower. They're a pollinator. So lots of different pollinators that are out there. So let's start with bees, the bumblebee, Bombus species. So these are fairly easy identified. Most people, you might confuse them a little bit with a carpenter bee. And we'll talk about how to tell the difference between the two of them. But the easiest one with the bumblebee is you're going to notice it's got that little, we call it the pollen basket, that's called a corbicula that's on its rear legs. So you can see that there. This one happens to be collecting pollen from a watermelon. So they're going to be really fuzzy. There's lots of different species out there. Some are really big, some are smaller, some have different colors. They might have whites and dark orangey kind of yellows and light yellows and all of that. And we have the butterflies. This one happens to be a skipper, but I mean, we have monarchs, we've got swallowtails, different types of swallowtails, we've got queens, we've got viceroys. I mean, we've got so many different types of butterflies out there, lots and lots and lots of them. And we get a lot of calls from people that say, where are all the butterflies? Where are they? And the thing is that when you live in suburbia, The problem is a lot of times people don't realize you got to have host plants for the young, for the caterpillars of these butterflies. And so when they plant things in their gardens or when they buy that new home with the landscape that the developer chose to put in, some of those plants or most of those plants, honestly, don't provide any benefit at all to butterflies. And so you actually have to go and choose the plants that they need for their babies. And until you do that and you make a garden, a pollinator garden with those host plants like milkweed and some others, passion fruit vine, passion flower vine, some other things like that, you're not going to have them. So, in order to increase the populations of specific types of pollinators, you have to provide the right habitat. So this will go into a little bit of that, but I've done lots of other presentations on how to attract pollinators and how to help their populations grow. So we're not going to really focus on that, but just know that that is something that's very important. You've got to have not only the food, you got to have the habitat, you also have to have the nursery habitat. Flies. A lot of people don't even really want to think about flies. They just think they're annoying, but they are an important pollinator. They do the job just like a beetle would, just like a butterfly would. This happens to be a tachnid fly, just kind of hanging out on a mint plant, maybe mountain mint or something like that. But they do a lot of pollinating, even garbage flies. You see these bottle flies, the greens and the blues buzzing around, maybe some garbage at a campsite or at a park or something like that. They'll pollinate just like anything else will. So they are important along with the other pollinators. Beetles. So this is a staphylid beetle on a moonflower. And they've been the first pollinators for flowering plants. There are a lot of different beetles out there. Like I'd mentioned, they're kind of the accidental pollinator. They kind of bumble through and collect a lot of that on their exoskeleton. Maybe they've got some hairs on their exoskeleton, which makes it super easy for them to collect pollen. They're not the most efficient. I mean, honeybees are pretty efficient. That, let's face it, they're probably the most efficient. But beetles still do a good job. So, you got to give them their due. They are pollinators just as well as anything else. And then birds, of course. I'll be doing a birds as pollinators presentation for a birding group, and I will use that presentation in our next round of webinars. So those will be being scheduled soon for December through February, and I'll probably add that one in there. It should be pretty interesting. But this is a ruby throat female. So she doesn't really have a ruby throat, does she? But the male does. And that is our endemic uh, hummingbird that we have here. I actually have a hummingbird nest in my oak leaf hydrangea right outside my front door. It's been very interesting to watch as the female built the nest and then she laid her eggs. And we also have chickens. And so I have to go shut the chicken coop up every night. And every night without fail, I walk out there and off she goes. She buzzes off because I've disturbed her off of her nest. But the eggs have now hatched and the babies are growing. But it's been interesting because we've had so much rain lately. She's actually collapsed the nest over the babies a little bit to help provide some shelter so they don't get too wet. It's been kind of interesting because it's right at eye level, so I can watch every time I go out there. Bats. We don't really think about bats. This is going to be more tropical, semi-tropical, and out west. We don't really have any um, pollinating bats here in Georgia, not really. This is the pallid bat. So most bats are going to eat insects. So if you're out at dusk and you look up, the likelihood that you see some bats flitting around, there's probably little brown bats. Pretty high, but they're insectivores. They're not actually pollinating bats. But there are a lot of different types of bats that eat both fruit, nectar. Uh, I'm trying to think of the real big one. Shoot, I'm blanking on the name. I was working on it earlier. Um, Flying foxes, that's it. So those are about the size of a small dog, and those are down, I believe, in South America. So those are actually pollinators, and there are quite a few different bats, but they just don't happen to be in this area. So let's kind of take a closer look. So what attracts pollinators to flowers. I mean, do they see them? Do they smell them? Well, it's a little bit of both, and maybe some of one and not any of all of another. So we kind of have to do a deep dive, and it's very intricate. I mean, if you think about how nature works and how everything kind of coexists and how it developed together, it's just very fascinating how that all works together. That's one of the reasons why I like doing these webinars because I get to do a lot of research. And as I'm going down the rabbit hole, I learn all sorts of really weird and wonderful things that I can share with you. So when you're looking at what attracts a pollinator to the flower, it's going to be the color. And what you would note if you do the pollinator census is different plants with different colored flowers are going to attract different types of pollinators. So you might have a butterfly bush or a buddleia out in your yard somewhere, and then it's kind of a violet purple color. It might attract butterflies, hence the name butterfly bush. You might also see some bees on it, maybe some flies, but you might not see a lot of wasps or other types of pollinating insects. And it probably never occurred to you that they weren't there. But when you start diving into the intricacies of how these insects are attracted to different flowers, it's actually pretty interesting. So sometimes it is flower color, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's flower odor, but sometimes it's not. For instance, birds, hummingbirds, they can't smell. So for them, it's shape of the flower. It's the promise that there's going to be a lot of nectar for them to eat because they need a lot of calories in order to keep going. Sometimes it's deception. I'll show you some pictures later. And sometimes that flower, a lot of times orchids are really good at deception. They look like something that is totally not what they actually are. So they're a lot of times they might attract. You see here a wasp. They might attract it by looking like its mate, a possible mate. And so the bug thinks that it's mating with another one of its species, but it's not. It's a flower. And in the meantime, it's now pollinated the flower. So really pretty cool. And so here's some examples of or a lot of these, like I mentioned, are orchids, but these are actual flowers. This is not AI. These are actual orchids. That one looks like a monkey. You've got Dutchman's breeches, maybe a little bit of an X-rated flower there. You've got some dancing ladies in the orchids. Here you've got one that kind of looks like a bird. This one looks like lips. Here you got another one that's kind of like a dancing lady. A parrot. This one looks like a parrot. And fairies. I mean, these are pretty fanciful. I guess I can see if you're really into orchids why. This one looks like a little baby wrapped up. I mean, that's pretty weird. That one kind of looks like a beetle. So lots of really cool stuff, as you can see. All right, native plants versus wildflowers. So a lot of people really get on this native kick and they're like, we have to have natives. We can't have anything that's not a native. And so sometimes the actual definition of it gets lost. And how do you like what is the difference between a native and maybe a wildflower or a non-native or endemic versus non-endemic? There's so many. Yeah, it can get really confusing. So sometimes native plants are sometimes referred to as wildflowers, but not all wildflowers are native plants. Yeah, I know the same thing with rhododendrons and azaleas. Most azaleas are going to be rhododendrons, but not all rhododendrons are azaleas. So native plants are going to be those that were growing in a particular area before human settlement. So think way back, go in the Wayback Machine. So before we moved over here and started taking over the US, if it was in this area, it's considered native. Wildflowers can be both native or exotic and introduced. They're usually a herbaceous plant, usually something, when I say herbaceous, the difference between a woody stemmed and a herbaceous plant, or something that kind of dies back every year, so very flexible. And they're capable of growing, reproducing, and becoming established without cultivation or any human intervention, meaning you can put some seed down and then just like forget about it and it's going to grow, it'll reseed. It's not invasive necessarily. necessarily, but it will go and do its thing, and you don't have to do anything on your part to keep it going. So they just kind of naturalize. Kind of think of it that way. They're naturalizing. So now let's move on to the hummingbird. So really, the ruby-throated, that's going to be really our only resident hummingbird. So we all breathlessly await. A lot of us have hummingbird feeders, and we wait until these little guys start migrating north in the springtime. And there's lots of maps you can go to online that will show you date by date when these little guys are moving north. You can go, if you see one, you can go in and put in the date and the location, and that helps people kind of track to see when they're migrating north and when they're going to be closer to where somebody else lives. So we do have some of these hummers that live in South Georgia all year round. Occasionally, you'll even get them up around here in the Atlanta area all year round. That's why we do recommend that you do provide some type of food. If you see one and it's kind of late in the season, just keep a good clean food supply out for them, sugar water, because sometimes for whatever reason they don't migrate, and these little guys need a lot of calories to keep going, and the last thing we want is for them to die because maybe it got knocked off course from a late storm. We get a lot of late tropical storms that will move through here, and they'll get caught up in the clouds and the system and tossed around, and then they get confused, they land, sometimes it's too late, and then you get a cold front. So it's really important, if you do see them, go ahead and continue to leave out some sugar water for a couple weeks after the actual migration is passed. And if you see one after migration has passed, go ahead and keep leaving that out so that they have a food source. Sometimes we'll have rufus, sometimes we'll have the calliope that come through. We've had quite a few of them. A lot of these are western birds. So if you've ever been out west, and along the Pacific Northwest especially, and you get a feeder out, I mean, you might have 5 or 6 different species buzzing around there, but we just don't really have that. Not to say they don't come out here, they do. We'll occasionally have them. But they don't live here, and that's usually because they've gotten really confused and gone off course. But like the rufus, 3,000 miles, that's a very long migratory route. And the calliope, I mean, they're small birds anyway, but that is the smallest bird in North America. They're pretty cute. So adaptations for hummingbirds. So most people know red. Obviously, that's why you see a hummingbird feeder, they're going to have that flower on there. It's going to be red. That's why if you have a solo cup and you're enjoying a beverage at an outdoor party or something, you might have one that comes up and hovers around looking at that red cup. Red is very easy for them to see. And so they may come up and investigate what that red object is because they're thinking, oh, it's food. And then they realize it's not food. If it's a solo cup, they're probably not going to want your margarita. Don't offer it to them. So, obviously, hummingbirds are diurnal. They live here during the day, they're not nocturnal. Okay, so they're going to prefer a tubular flower. That's kind of an obvious thing. They have a very long beak with a very long little tongue, and they'll poke that down in there to get the nectar. And while they're doing that, they'll get a little pollen around on their face, that kind of thing. So they need a lot of nectar. They have a very, very high metabolism. They fly very fast. They use a lot of energy. So it's important that if you're going to go ahead and make a bird garden, let's just call it a bird garden, or a pollinator patch, or whatever you want to do, plant for them too, not just the butterflies and the bees, because they're pollinators as well. So consider having some trumpet-like type flowers or some tubular flowers because that's what's going to attract them. You can use coral honeysuckle. There's some native hummingbird type vines here that have red flowers. They're kind of in the morning glory family. Got to be careful. They can drop a lot of seed, but the hummingbirds love them. I allow some to come up around my garden, and I have tons of hummers every single summer. They really appreciate that. And whatever you're planting, the flowers need to open during the day because that's when they feed. So you've got to have them ready for the birds when they're there. So with bird pollinated flowers in general, and it's not just hummingbirds. Okay. There's all sorts of birds out there. Orioles are also, we don't have those a lot here. Sometimes we get them, but not very often. Orioles, there's a lot of South American and African birds that honey creepers, honey eaters. There's a lot of different birds out there that are pollinators. Again, here in North America, it's mostly going to be the orioles and the hummingbirds. Those are our little pollinating bird friends. Most of the time, most of the other stuff we're not going to see at all unless you're in the southern part of the country, down in a tropical region. Sometimes it happens, especially if you're close to Mexico along the Gulf Coast, but usually not here. So with bird pollinated flowers, that nectar is going to be in a very long tube, like you see below. Again, little to no fragrance because that plant doesn't need to do it. It's trying to attract that bird to feed it. And again, birds don't really smell. And generally speaking, it's not going to have a landing platform. That is not always the case. Sometimes with orioles and some of these other types of birds, they'll actually latch on to the stem of the flower and help themselves. But generally speaking, that's what you're going to see here, especially in and around North America. So Georgia native plants for hummingbirds, as I mentioned, the trumpet honeysuckle, so coral honeysuckle, that's going to bloom. I know you hear the word honeysuckle and you're like, oh, that's invasive. No, this is a native, very slow growing as compared to the Japanese honeysuckle, and it's a different color. So it's kind of a coral color. And then you have the cardinal flower. I love this. It's great for rain gardens as well as just generalized native gardens. It's very tolerant of wet feet. So if you have kind of an area that holds a little bit too much rain, after we've had like 6 inches of rain, like we have this last week, this stuff is pretty good. And the flowers are perfect for all the little hummingbirds and butterflies. Sometimes red columbine. So this is going to be one that's going to attract hummingbirds as well as butterflies. Columbine, we're on the very southern part of its hardiness range. It's a little warm down here, so you probably will want to find that and put it in something that's someplace that's going to get morning sun and not afternoon sun. It's not a big fan of the heat. Indian pinks, again, not a huge fan of the heat, so something with morning sun. And you've got red buckeye, lots of different things like red buckeye. It's not just hummingbirds, but obviously the color attracts them and they have tubular flowers. So you'll also see butterflies on red buckeye. It's very pretty. And then Monarda, bee balm. There's a lot of different varieties. This one isn't necessarily easy to find. Generally, if you're looking for Monarda in a nursery, you're going to end up with a lot of these other cultivars or nativars that are kind of a purpley color. And that's perfectly fine for butterflies and for other types, but for whatever reason, the red is generally a little challenging to find. So here's some of the other hummingbirds you might see. So again, most of these are Western species, but they do end up here occasionally. I've seen a couple of them over the course of my life, and I don't have a hummingbird feeder up right now, but they're really neat birds. I mean, traveling out west, I've seen all of these, and they're just gorgeous little birds. So you've got the black-chinned hummingbird, Anna's. You've got the broad-tail hummingbird, Allen's hummingbird, broad-billed, and then the magnificent hummingbird, which really truly is magnificent. I mean, I've seen 10 or 15 of those little guys buzzing around, and it's kind of cute when they argue over the nectar source when they're fighting around the feeder and getting very territorial. They are very territorial little birds. So if you have the ability to put up a couple feeders, it's probably a good thing. So adaptations for butterflies. So butterflies are attracted to a lot of different colors. It's not just red like it is for hummingbirds. They prefer to have flower clusters that they can land on and then use that long proboscis to probe multiple different flowers. So obviously you can see here this is a butterfly bush, a buddleia, and they don't really smell so odorless. There may be a light odor to it. There are some varieties of butterfly bush that have some odor, but generally they're going to be fairly odorless, and they're going to ask for smaller nectar tubes. So with a hummingbird, you generally want longer individual flowers, whereas this is going to be a cluster of tubular flowers together where that butterfly can get its long tongue in there. And you can see here, this is the extended tongue or proboscis on the right, and it's all curled up. I mean, we've all seen butterflies do that. And then the uncurled, unfurled one that they put down into the flower in order to get the nectar. So here's some native plants for butterflies. So you have some garden phlox and penstemon. That's another one, or beard tongue. That's a good one. And you have swamp milkweed, any Asclepias type species that you can find. As I've noticed that over the years, pollinator plants are really kind of becoming a thing, and a lot of big boxes and regular nurseries are selling them now. So it's easier to source, and it's been, I guess, made known that we really can't put insecticides on these, and the nursery industry has been pretty good for the most part about these pollinating plants and not using systemics. What happens is they don't want aphids and other stuff like that because they want their flowers to look really nice, right? So if you go out to the big box store with the intention of purchasing a bunch of plants to put in your garden, you don't want them being all nibbled on and looking ugly. So generally the nursery industry will use some type of a systemic pesticide to help control that. Well, you can't do that with butterflies and with pollinating plants. If you're selling it as a pollinating plant, you've just used a systemic insecticide on there that when that butterfly or that insect collects that nectar, it might die. So the pollinator plants that are available in the nursery industry has kind of thankfully gotten wise to that. And so a lot of them don't use those kinds of chemicals on the plants that they're selling to you and I. And that's a good thing. They might look a little rough, but that's okay because they're going to provide food and they're going to keep coming back, and that's what they're there for. You also have salvia or the lyre leaf sage. That's another one. You've got deer tongue and you've got goldenrod. That's a monarch on there. And so now we're going to kind of move on to moths. So most people don't really think about moths as pollinators. You see them flying around out there at night, and sometimes they hit the window. Cats will see them in the window and go a little crazy. Uh, but they are pollinators as well. There are some night blooming flowers that need something in order to pollinate them. And butterflies don't fly at night, nor do many other types of pollinating insects or birds or other animals. So they've had to come up with slightly different adaptations in order to attract moths to pollinate for them. So for night blooming flowers like this Jimson weed or the Datura, you're going to have a white color. So it's going to be very brilliant white. It's also going to be tubular because remember, they have a proboscis just like a butterfly does. And it needs a long tubular flower in order to get that nectar out from down there and large amounts of nectar, just like for a hummingbird, just like for a butterfly. And again, it needs to be open at night. So this is just kind of an interesting picture because you don't ever really think about how long their little tongues are, do you? I mean, look at this. So it does kind of look like it's going to be fairly long, but that's like 10 inches. That's crazy. I mean, it's giving Gene Simmons a run for his money. So here you can see nectar spurs on the columbine. So those are going to be pockets where they're going to dip down with their tongue and they're going to get that nectar out of there. So you can see that's an adaptation for those particular pollinators that have a long tongue, like a hummingbird or hummingbird moth or a butterfly or moth. So some plants for moths. You've got the bottle brush buckeye. There's some buckeyes in here. So you can see that the flower is very white and they're going to bloom June to July. There is a little bit of aroma, but not much. But they're very pretty, and you'll also get daytime visitors as well. And then you've got unicorn root. Don't see that a ton in cultivated areas, but if you get a good native nursery, you should be able to source some of that. Allium or the nodding onion. So there are a lot of different types of alliums out there, and this is one of the native plants. And then you've got the Eastern persimmon. There's also the American persimmon, but this is the Eastern persimmon. So the flowers are really tiny, actually. I've got some American persimmons in my backyard. They're just wild, and I mean, honestly, you don't even hardly know that they're blooming. This one, not so much the American, but the Eastern persimmon has the white flowers, and so it's attracting the moths. But you can see the fruit up there. So if you have had an Eastern persimmon and you've enjoyed some of the fruit off of them, you can thank a moth for that. Here's the Southern beard tongue, and you can see, I mean, you can pretty much tell when you look at the flowers, you're like, oh, I know exactly what's going to pollinate that. And then you have the wild bergamot. What does it look like? Yeah, that's right. It's bee balm. It looks like bee balm. So Monarda. They're all in the Monarda family. And bees. So bees are going to be attracted to a particular set of colors different than hummingbirds or moths. So remember, hummingbirds red, moths white, butterflies a variety of colors, and bees it's going to be yellow, blue, and white. So when I had mentioned earlier that maybe you have looked at the bugs pollinating before, but never really thought that why are they on this plant but not this plant? Here you go. So bees are going to prefer yellow, blue, and white. So you see here in this particular St. John's wort flower, you've got a tiny little sweat bee on there. These are going to be short tubes, very sweet scent. So it's going to have a nice, pretty scent. And it's going to have ultraviolet patterns, otherwise known as nectar guides. So this is one of those really interesting things that maybe you just didn't know about, and that's fine. Most people don't look at flowers under UV lights. But if you're crazy like me, you might have a black light around the house. Go outside at night and shine it on some of these flowers, and this is what you might see. So these are nectar guides. So you can see like A and B. So it looks yellow, but under UV light, which remember that's how insects see, it's got like this bullseye in the middle. And that's kind of like landing lights for those insects. So like right here is where the food is. And then C and D, you can see there, again, bullseye, white, kind of drawing them in, and so on and so forth all the way through. You can see that there's different ways that these are registering under UV light, and that's to attract whatever insect is the one that they're trying to attract. So, I mean, it's really interesting how things have kind of evolved together to actually attract that particular type of insect that's going to be its most efficient pollinator. So you can see lots of variation here. You've got some henbit. Yeah, so that little creeping green purpley flower in your Bermuda or zoysia lawn in the spring, when you go, man, I should have put that pre-emergent down. And then you get that. That's the very first flower in the spring. So if you're going to treat that, mow it first, because what happens is that's one of the very first flowers in the spring that the pollinators will go after because it's a very reliable source of nectar. What you don't want to do is you don't want to spray it and then have pollinators visit it. It can make them sick. So mow first and then spray. You've got Joe Pye weed, another one that's very tolerant of marshy or wetter conditions, but lots of variation in the flower. Carolina geraniums and sunflowers, lots of different types of sunflowers. And beetle pollinators. So they're very clumsy, as I mentioned. They don't have very good vision. So they like a very high contrast color. So if you're looking at like a blue flower, probably not. But pink with yellow or white with yellow, yeah, they're probably going to bumble across those particular flowers. That's very high contrast, and they are going to be active during the day. So beetle pollinated flowers, those are going to be like trees that you might find in your yard, tulip poplars, dogwoods, and magnolias. You can see a dogwood flower down there. And flowers that are kind of growing closer to the ground. So if you've got wildflowers out in your backyard or you're up in the mountains and you're hiking and you see a bunch of them, those are probably beetle pollinated. Those flowers are going to be fairly light colored and they're going to have like a fruity or spicy smell. So if you smell something like that and you're like, that kind of smells good. That's a beetle pollinated flower. So you've got green and golds. That's a good native plant. You can generally find that. You've got some coreopsis. And now on to flies. So flies, as I mentioned, a lot of people don't realize that they're pollinators. That's okay. Um, Bottle flies also, tachnid flies, hover flies, those all are pollinators. And they're going to be attracted, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, to spicy, rotten smells. Have you ever heard of the corpse flower? Yeah, don't go smelling it. It's kind of stinky. But they're going to prefer reds and purples and blue flowers. Those are the things that are going to attract them and the stinky smell. So, um, they're not really, I mean, people don't plant pollinator gardens with flies in mind. I mean, let's just admit that. Uh, they're beautiful. If you look at some photography, the iridescence on some of them, it's very pretty, but what can you say? They are interesting, though. Let's talk about why. We'll do that in a second. But some fly pollinated flowers, you'll also get, remember, these are not exclusively fly pollinated flowers. There are other types of insects, and even hummingbirds will go after echinacea, the purple coneflower, but this is one that will attract them. So you'll also have the copper iris and, you know, other variations of that. So diving into what can we do? Well, I think I already mentioned is putting a pollinator garden in. And honestly, if you don't have a lot of space, that is absolutely fine. There's a lot of us out there that have a condo. You might be on a third floor and you have a balcony, and that's it. And that's okay because we do a lot of container gardening around here, and you can do a pollinator garden in your containers. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You don't have to have an in-ground pollinator garden. We are not pollinator snobs, and neither are the bugs. If you give them the plants and the flowers, they're going to come. They will find you. So if you're in the same place and you're putting the same thing out year after year, you will notice year after year your populations of insects will get larger because they remember, they come back. So when we talk about doing a pollinator census event, we need to make sure that we have something in the ground growing pollinator flowers, zinnias or cosmos or something like that. At least start them in the spring because you can't just go down to a big box and pick up a tray of whatever's and bring them back to your patio and expect that they'll be covered up in bees. It takes them a bit. They've got to find it. But anyway, you want a variety because, as I mentioned, different bugs like different colors and different shapes. And if you want to attract a variety, you got to have a variety to give them. So a variety of blooms is going to be key to that. You want to plant in drifts and clusters. What that means is you want plant in odd numbers. So if you're planting in ground, then have, 5 or 7 of one type of flower and then have a cluster of something else, maybe 3. Alternate that. I mean, you're going for both functionality and beauty. So, kind of pick a bunch of different stuff. Maybe you want a theme. Just note that if you're only picking a couple of colors and you're doing monochromatic, you're not going to get the full variety of insects. So keep that in mind. If you want a riot of color and a bunch of different types of blooms, then you'll have a lot better luck with pollinators. Don't use a lot of mulch. Try not to use landscape fabrics because a lot of them will use the ground as nursery habitat and the leaves and everything that drop. So try to think full cycle. If you're providing them food, also provide them nursery habitat. Here's some examples. And, this is just an example, like I said. So if you want native plant nurseries, you can use this QR code. Remember, this is being recorded, so it will show up on our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel, and you can get that list or go to the State Botanical Garden. You can type in native plant nursery, State Botanical Garden of Georgia, and you will get a list like what you see here. So you know where to go to purchase some of these. All right. So what can we do? Well, you can create habitat, you can offer food sources, and you can provide shelter. And that's the same thing with any wildlife, whether it be a bug or a bear. So make sure with food sources, I know I did say um, at least a couple weeks on the hummingbird, but if you want to get that gold star for being an awesome, awesome pollinator friend, keep it up year round. Just make sure it's clean because that sugar water can ferment if it gets warmer. It'll attract and grow mold spores. You can get, ants and you can get yellow jackets and stuff that are attracted to it. So clean it out pretty periodically. Just keep it fresh. You can use ant moats and yellow jacket proof feeders to kind of foil the bugs in that case if you're trying to go for the hummingbirds. Offer puddle sources. So butterflies like to feed. One of the things that's easy to do, you get the bowl of a bird feeder, not a bird feeder, a bird bath, fill it up with pebbles, and then put water on it until it's level with the top of the pebbles. So they'll land on the pebbles, they're safe, they're not going to drown, and they'll be able to use their proboscis to suck up the water. Passion fine. Um, Food resources, these are the young of those beautiful butterflies that you want. So you need to know what the host plants are for these caterpillars. So dill, passion flower vine, parsley, there's a lot of different types of host plants for a lot of different types of butterflies. So just make sure if you're planting pollination plants, you're also planting host plants. So as the adults come by and feed, they can also lay their eggs and you'll have the next generation. So if you want to help the next generation, you got to have everything there. Also considering nectar availability. This one's from Michigan. This is just kind of a calendar for nectar availability. You want to try to have something available all the time. So this one obviously isn't necessarily for Georgia, Georgia Native Plant Society, and there's some others out there. This one is just pretty, so I'm trying to explain pictorially what you're looking for. And knowing your garden. So you need to know sun. You got to know how many hours of sunlight you have. Oops. You got to know cloudy, rain, how much rain? Is it wet? Is it moist? Is it near a stream? Is it dry as a bone because it's way far away and you get a lot of sunlight? You got to know all of that stuff. Providing shelter. So a lot of those little solitary bees are cavity nesters, as you can see here. So you can purchase bee houses and just know that that's fine, but you need to clean them out and replace all those little tubules. And you can go if you can find some bamboo around, you can easily do that. You can also purchase straws. They have to be a particular size. There's some publications out there that will tell you that. So just know you got to get a particular size of straw. But we can help you figure that out. For sources, you can buy stuff with the packs of straws and replace those or make your own. You can cut your own. You can make them out of paper. You can drill them in old, branches, cut the branches to size and then drill the holes in there and put those in there. There's a lot of different ways to do this. You can do all recycled materials. The only thing, don't do it with treated lumber. Providing shelter. I know you're looking at this and you're like, oh, those are fire ants. No, they're not. Um, In the spring, you're going to get these little guys, these little solitary bees that are doing their little bee love dance, and they're looking for mates and they're hovering around and they're looking, and they may have these it may look really horrible and you're like, what the heck is wrong with my lawn? I need to get somebody out there and treat it. No, don't treat it. Please don't. I promise you, they'll be gone after a couple weeks and you will have helped the next generation of solitary bees. So these are the cute little guys that are messing your yard up temporarily until the next rain. Let them do their thing. They will move on. They look for very sunny kind of areas that have open soil where they can dive down and make their little burrows. So usually March, like March, April, early April is going to be when you'll see them. And they'll be in a sunny area with some exposed soil. Don't spray. This is what'll happen. I already mentioned that. It goes without saying, please don't spray insecticides, even organics. Spinosad, it'll kill them. So make sure that if you have to do some type of an insecticidal treatment, do it after the sun goes down, after the pollinators are out of the area. Just be very careful and be very careful about systemics as well. Now, this Southeast pollinator census. So we're going to kind of go over this. It's so simple, folks. So simple. But I want to sell it because it's fun too. It's really good if you have friends, if you're in a club, if you're a master gardener, if you've got a church group, anybody. It is so simple. It's fun. You can make a pollinator party about it, and you will get some good data, and that can get uploaded to the website, and they will have lots of good observations that they can use for their research. So it's going to be this August 22nd and 23rd. It's a Friday, Saturday. Those are the only 2 days they use the data from. So you're welcome to count outside of that, but for the need of quantitative data, they have to stick with that particular data set of the 22nd and 23rd. So go ahead if you need to and count on Sunday, but it can't be counted in the pollinator census. And so we have Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, and Alabama. And who knows, maybe we'll add in Tennessee. That's kind of the mid-South. But yeah, that's great. I mean, we've come a long way. We've got a bunch more states now. It's awesome. So what you do is you're going to use this data, or we're going to use this data, and you too can also, if you want to present to your club or church group or whoever, your book club, use it as a way to kind of let people know about these wonderful insects. I mean, I think I mentioned like one of every 3 bites of food you put in your mouth is created by a pollinator. So we want people to understand why they're so important. And this is a really great way to do it. And it will also help, I guess, put the word out that even if you live on with just a balcony, you can have a pollinator habitat out there. That, I mean, the bugs will come, they'll find it. You just have to have it. And lastly, it's going to give us a lot of really good data because, I mean, there are people like me or there's people at the university and they can go out there and they can do counts, but that's not going to give you a really good statistical sample. To have a really good statistical sample, you got to have more than 100 observations. I mean, there's not enough people in jobs of what I do in order to do that. So we ask all of you guys, the citizen scientists, to go do that also. Make it simple, make it easy, make it fun, and then you guys can go out there and do it just like we can. And all that wonderful data comes back, and that will tell us the health of pollinators. So you have to make sure you've got something blooming. The easiest thing to do is seed some zinnias or cosmos, I said. Super cheap, very pretty, great for cut flowers and for pollinators. Hopefully you have some of those. If not, then you can always go to a friend or even the nursery. There's a lot of nurseries that will have stuff like this. We also have a lot of public ones that will have. Here's some lists of pollinator plants that are blooming in August. You've got mountain mint, scarlet sage, New England aster, hot lip salvia. I've got a lot of these in my garden down there. Some sedums, blazing star, cosmos, zinnias, of course, swamp sunflower. Mine's not quite blooming yet. Lantana, of course, black-eyed Susan, coneflowers, all of those will be blooming in a couple weeks, and you can use them for your plant of choice for the pollinator census. And then these are the categories that they're broken down into. So carpenter bees and bumblebees, honeybees, small bees, wasps, flies, butterflies and moths, and other insects. Okay, so here's the categories. So here's your carpenter bee, and they're going to have no hair on their abdomen. So I know we always joke in the spring when the males are out and they're out looking for females, and the females are out looking for wood so that they can burrow in and lay their eggs in there. The easiest way to tell if it's a bumblebee or it's a carpenter bee, look at its rear end. If there is no hair at all on that rear end, it's a carpenter bee. It will have dense hair similar to a bumblebee on its head and thorax, but that rear end is always going to be hair free. Bumblebees, these guys are hairy. So you can see here, um, they're always going to have hair on their rear end. So if you see it, it's got hair on its rear end, it's a bumblebee. And they're always pretty much going to have that dense yellow and black hair. You might get some white on there. It really depends on the species. Very fat with a tiny little head, and it's always going to have hair on its rear end. And then the secondary thing with the bumbles is they'll have that pollen basket. We call that a corbicula. So if they've been feeding recently, they're going to have that little basket of goodness back there on their hind legs, and they will have longer antennae than the carpenters. So here's a little bit of a comparison side by side. So you can see the shiny thorax and the shiny abdomen over here on the right. That's a carpenter bee, and then on the left, it's got hair and stripes. That's a bumblebee. And I don't know who came, I think maybe it was Becky Griffin that came up with this shiny bum or fuzzy bum and shiny hiney. An easy way to remember it. All right, honeybees. So these are going to have brown or black stripes. It really depends. You might have Italian honeybees. There's slight differences between the two species. Golden brown hair that's going to cover that abdomen. You can see there, and they have kind of that cute little face. Most of the time, they're more concerned with collecting their pollen and nectar than they are with you. So just kind of observe them, don't touch them, and things like that. I say that because I have a 14-year-old boy that likes to go around touching the rear ends of bumblebees and honeybees. And I constantly tell him, just leave them alone, please. But anyway. All right. Distinguishable honeybees and bumblebees. So with the honeys, you're going to have that yellow and black, very much slender abdomen, not nearly as fuzzy as the bumbles. They're smaller generally. The bumbles here, we don't have a ton of really tiny ones. Most of ours are going to be bigger. So the smaller bee is going to be kind of a muted in color, and they'll live in larger colonies. Usually they're mistaken between a yellow jacket or some other ground dwelling bee versus a bumble. Small bees, these are going to be like your sweat bees, minor bees, furrow bees, and leaf cutters. So these are going to be the guys that if you have a bee hotel, the leaf cutters and the mason bees, those are all going to be the ones that plug up those little tubes with mud or cut leaf particles, that kind of thing. And then you have your small bees. It's going to be like your sweat bees, leaf cutters, some of them, and others. These are just kind of broken into categories to make it super easy for people, for on layman's terms, to just go, oh yeah, it's a green bee. So it's a sweat bee, so that's a small bee. And flies, I think we can all probably know we can identify flies. We have the bottle flies, the greens and the blues. And then we have the long-legged flies, the tachinid flies. Those are ugly as sin, but still pollinators, crane flies. And then we have bee mimics. These are kind of cool. So this is Batesian mimicry. So look at this guy. He looks like a bee, doesn't he? Well, that's what he's hoping because he doesn't want to get eaten by the bird. So he's going to look like bee, but he has two wings instead of the four, which bees do. So but the birds don't know. So he wants the birds to think that he's going to sting them. So he's got similar coloration to what a bee does. But again, it's the number of wings. And wasps, yes, those are pollinators as well. And these guys can be potter wasp, paper wasp, and there's all sorts of others. You've got the, couple examples here. Those are always going to have a very, very, very narrow tapered waist and a rather large kind of pointy abdomen. And they'll have those antennae that are kind of out and then they hook and hang down. And of course, your butterflies. Most of those are pretty self-explanatory. There's a lot of different kinds out there. Moths. Some of these might be a little confusing. You've got the sphinx or the hawk moth. We see those every so often. They're not terribly populous around here, but you still see them. And then you've got your webworm moth and the scape moth. And then we go into the other category. So you don't need to know what all of these are. You just need to know it's not one of the others. So praying mantises, there's just an other. Wheel bug is just an other. Ambush bug, also an other. And how do we do it? Okay, very simple. Here's some of our events that we're hosting this year. So we've got, if you want to not host one and you just want to come and count, then you can come check this out, do a screenshot of this. We've got the Southeastern Cooperative, I shouldn't say ministry, but the Southeastern Food Co-op in Grayson on Friday. These are on Friday. We've got Gwinnett Technical College. We'll have one over there by the greenhouse on Friday. I'll be at the Isaac Adair House, which is in Lawrenceville on Friday. And then Saturday, we've got Mason Elementary School. So if you've got school-aged kids, come on out to Mason. They do one for their kids, but they'll also be doing one that's open to the public on Saturday. We have Vines Park. That's a popular one. We've got a really nice butterfly garden out there maintained by the master gardeners, and they always have tons of people, lots of awesome. They've got all sorts of different pollinator plants out there. It's really cool. And then we've got Archie's Garden at McDaniel Farm, which is fantastic. This is the first year in a while, I think, that they've participated, but they have all sorts of pretty pollinator plants, zinnias, and some other stuff out there. That's off Satellite Drive up there in Duluth. And then Slow Pour Brewing, that one's in Lawrenceville. And we have Becky Griffin is coming to this one. Slow Pour is a public-private partnership that we've really cultivated for years, and they've really come through environmentally speaking and have a lot of events. And they've hosted one every single year with Dr. Tim Mullen. He's one of our master gardeners, was kind of the founder of this garden and really put everything together. And this has been a really great event. We get a lot of participation. There's a beautiful pollinator beer garden there. But Becky Griffin's coming this year, so we're really excited about that. And first, you're going to pick a plant. Pretty simple. Try to pick one that you can already see has a lot of insect activity. And then get your little card. We have rack cards that we'll be distributing out to all of the public counts. And it'll have stuff like the temperature. We'll provide all of that. Or you can look it up on your phone. The time, the weather conditions, whether there's a beehive nearby, just some bits of information so that they can kind of figure out why there's so many honeybees on one particular flower. And then you're going to watch it for 15 minutes. And each time a bug flies away and then flies back and touches it, you're counting it. And you use little hatch marks. And you'll have a list of all those different bugs that I was talking about. And then, like I said, every time it flies away and comes back, that's one more count. And then that's basically it. You do that for 15 minutes. You can turn those cards into us if you want to do it at home or at a park on your own. You can do that. There's observation stuff that you can download off of this website. There's also lots of other information if you have homeschool kids or you know somebody that does. There's a lot of really good curriculum information on there. You can check it out. Lots of good stuff. And then as always, we will take some questions. And again, for those of you that are still here with me, if you have not put your location where you're from in the chat box, I would really appreciate it if you could do that. That will help me start to kind of figure out where people are coming from. I know we're getting more and more master gardeners from around the state. I'm getting people that write me from Florida. I had someone request my slide deck from Ghana. So this is pretty cool. And I love that people are getting lots of good information and wanting that information to share with others. So go ahead and put that in there. And if you have any questions at all, I am happy to answer. I'll check here in a second. But again, this is being recorded. So if you're interested, you can always check that out. I'll probably upload it maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday. I'm not sure. There's some other stuff up on the Master Gardeners, Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel also about this. Says, oh, do you record? Yes, this will be up. Let's see. Probably no questions. It's pretty simple. Okay. Doesn't look like I have any questions about anything in specifics. This was a very light one. We didn't delve too much into the big specifics. Most of what we touched, I've gone much more in depth on in other webinars that I've done, and those are all up on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel, which you can find at using that QR code. And if you're interested in other classes, we have more coming up. I've got one on, I think, weirdest plants. I also have one on, oh, and if you want the slide deck, I see there's a request there. If you don't mind, just send me an email and say, please send me the slide deck. I'm happy to share that if you would like it. But just to keep me sane, just send me an email. I work best off email. It may take me a while if you have questions and things like that, because I try to compile it and give a very, concise answer. But anyway, if you have if you want to watch other stuff, I do lots of different things. I'm always open for suggestions on other topics. So if you are interested in something else and you want me to take a deep dive and do a webinar, I am happy to do that. Let's see, suggestion for pollinator website if you have time. I'm not sure what that means. I can go back to the what Great Southeast Pollinator Census. You can type that into your search engine. Let's see, that one. Oh, I have a suggestion to improve the website. The Southeast Pollinator website. Okay. So that one I would recommend reaching out on their website to their webmaster. There's probably an email on there. And then you can give your suggestion there. I don't manage that, so that's a Becky Griffin thing. Um, so that's basically it. My email's here, and I don't just do the webinars. I also do a lot of diagnostics and other stuff for Gwinnett County. So if you're in Gwinnett County, I am happy to answer other types of questions. We'll have in-person webinars as well. We also have, a lot of other interesting stuff coming up. So definitely check out our events and classes on that website. And for those of you who have been following and maybe aren't a Master Gardener, registration is now open for Master Gardener class for 2026 for Gwinnett County. So it opened up on the 1st of August and it will run through the end of September. So if you are interested in becoming an educated outreach volunteer, that process is open now. You can check out, just use that QR code to get to our website, and then you can get on the Master Gardener tab if you're interested and download the application. Or you can email me and I will get you that information also. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. I'm going to stop sharing, and I hope that you all have a wonderful evening. Take care.